course, was chasing me for last few days to get this, but at least it's on time. So good. Thanks. The other point also I wanted to mention, I was told in the during lunch time when we were having lunch that last few sessions this course have been very interactive. So we'll of course ensure that we make the same, continue the same way in this session also. So please feel free to raise any queries, any questions anytime you think fit, and we'll try to answer and resolve. We'll start with transfer pricing story so far, how it has gone, and as I said, it's very involved and very hot, if I keep using that word, and in Mumbai is experiencing a good summer now. I was told yesterday it was 38 degrees in the BBC weather report, which is normally true as their news are. And then we'll go to some background on what transfer pricing involves, especially on the adjustments. What we need to, which are the various dispute resolution mechanisms, including DRP, CIT appeal. We'll also dwell the alternate dispute resolution mechanism, which is more important for TP, MAP and APA, and some tips on representation, especially on TP side. And I will be ably assisted by Milin and Mehul, who will work on this presentation and lot of contributions from them. So, story so far, it's the 9 year of TP audits which just got over, TP assessments got over this January 2014 and March 2014. Of course, we have received the draft order now. And the adjustment amounts are increasing every year by year. And as lunchtime we were discussing with our senior colleague here, this is becoming very matter of concern for most of the foreign MNC and I will say Indian MNC as well. And if we see practically, because there is a big TP adjustment, practically on ground level, we must have noticed that now there is not many adjustments are happening from AO side, the assessment officer side for the normal tax assessments, because practically he gets a very big adjustment. So as far as he is concerned, in his record, the demand is high when he creates, and there is not much focus is there on the normal tax assessments. And 11 billion is the dollar for the latest tax year which just got over, that is FY 10-11, financial year ending on March 10, about 70 crores and 70,000 crores. So we are losing the zeros when we do TP adjustments. And last year was still higher by the CBT estimate, it was 85,000 crores. So it's a very significant amount of adjustments as we know. And if I recollect few years back, it was mainly disputes were with comparables is right or wrong with the TPOs, transfer pricing officers. But and to some extent it's credit to them. They moved the value chain very quickly, and if I say much quicker than we professionals. I mean, they learned very quickly and learning very quickly. And now they have a lot of new issues like marketing intangibles on AMP expense, which we get time will discuss. Issue of shares is very hot. We keep hearing Vodafone, Shell, and there are other 30 cases which are not heard so often, but they are equally important and equally amount of adjustments are as significant as Vodafone. And Vodafone now, we know it's Vodafone 1 was Hutch transaction, but now we have, after all were TP adjustments, then we have Vodafone 2, 3, 4, and we lose count now which case is where, and I'm sure they must be facing difficult time recollecting. DRP was very effective mechanism which we came after a lot of representation from professionals and bodies like CTC and others to CBDT, and it was a good mechanism if you know implemented properly, and that's where the disconnect is. Because if we see the earlier dispute resolution mechanism when it came up, it was to two, three things were very positive. One was there was no demand. So even if you have 85,000 crores of adjustment or 75,000 crores of adjustment, it doesn't matter. There is no immediate cash flow, and there was a timeline to decide within 9 months, which is still there. Both these factors are still there. So that unlike CIT appeal where pendency is there, we don't know it will be decided. Whereas DRP was, the timeline was 9 months, and important point was there that time was that it was binding on revenue authorities, whatever they decide. So a lot of positives was there, and we are expecting a lot of, I will say, favorable orders, and it should have worked properly. I mean, the concept was very good, but as we see later on, the ground level realities were different, and we just touch base going forward. The other point, many times we hear that India-TP disputes are very high compared to, say, countries like US or UK, or even when we come to so-called BRIC countries, and we keep discussing Brazil, Russia, India and China and South Africa also now, but Asia Pacific, China and Korea, for example, the disputes are not as high as India has. Now there is one basic difference which we must know. First of all revenue authorities are same. They are as aggressive as that can be. It can be in US, UK or any other country, including India. So it's not that they are not aggressive or they don't take aggressive positions. One point which other countries has that the field officer and the taxpayer they know there is a mechanism to settle the case at that assessment stage also. So even if they go to court, before that there is a mechanism whereby both are offered an opportunity to settle. Now within this room in India, when I say settle the case, it will be heard or interpreted differently. But those countries, that's why the disputes are so less. So it's not that they are not aggressive, but they get a chance to kind of come to a which is a fair and reasonable result for both revenue authorities as well as taxpayers, which is in India is not there. And China, with all respect, it's still, my China partner always says that there is a mechanism of going out appeal, but they don't have any work. Because in China it's very clear that if you go in appeal, the adjustment can be doubled. So nobody goes in appeal there, and same in Korea. So what I was trying to say that many times if our clients tell us that you are aggressive, we have to, not because we are patriotic, of course we are patriotic Indians, but the fact is that revenue authorities are aggressive all over the world. And because the way the appeal mechanism works there, and nobody goes there for appeal in China and Korea. So it doesn't mean that TP is aggressive, audits are there only in India. And for that, MAP was introduced some time back, and we'll see further that safe harbor norms came last year. The rules, the sections came, provisions came in Finance Act 2009, Finance number 2 Act 2009 after general elections those days. Now we are having other general elections in 14. But the norms were notified, the markups were notified after almost 4 years or 4.5 years. In August or September 2013, and some orders were passed on 31st March, but because the markup is very high, I was told very few applications have been filed all over India, about 14 or 15, I mean not more than 20 in any case, which was a setback for, I think, because CBDT and Ministry was expecting a big, I will say big flow of safe harbor applications, which has not happened. Maybe because it came after year was over, after March 13 was over, and it came in September 13. But I don't think now March 14 is also over, but we don't see a big, because the markup is very high. APA is good, and APA was introduced in Finance Act 2012. Rules came, and as the bullet suggests, we did sign up. There was a lot of, I will say, news were made on 31st March. So India did sign off the first APS with 5 APS, which was, I will say, very creditable within 1 year of filing applications with the CBDT, with the APA Commissioner. So this was very few countries have this track record, including China. They have never signed their first APS. I was told it took at least 2.5 years. So it's very creditable for EPA team, and personal experience suggests that they are very open and transparent, and we really get a fair and reasonable result with them. So this is one mechanism. Hopefully it's not going the way DRP went, and it's going the way it should be. And then last, of course, not yet heard, and while India, we are to some extent moving to a resolution of disputes. OECD, as you know, last few months they are very, very busy on BAPs, price erosion and profit shifting. And now there are 15 action points. Out of that, 4 or 5 I think are for transfer pricing. And one of the so that shows how transfer pricing is important globally also. Out of 15 action points for BAPs, price erosion and profit shifting, 4 or 5 relates to TP. And one of the main was on how you show country by country reporting or global master file concept. And now that this will be a big area of again a dispute and compliance burden the way OECD is going. Country by country reporting will be that we are filing documentation, and you have discussed that earlier in the sessions. And so that within the documentation, each country will be also filing the whole what other AEs is doing, the whole group structure, and I'm sure that will increase litigation because then the TPOs will get I will say any officer, not just TPOs in India. So this is another an exchange of information article. So OECD is going very, very quickly, unlike in past years when they were moving slowly. So we are TP professionals or TP specialists, which this group is, I think we are off for good business and good learning for at least next few years, the way global world or TP world is moving. Legal framework, I won't spend much time. You have discussed, I am sure, in earlier sessions on what transactions and what documents we are required to maintain under Rule 10D, read with Section 92D. And there, this is one other apprehension I have by country reporting. The template which OECD has developed and they are still modifying. But I won't be surprised if many revenue authorities in various countries of the world will just accept that template. And I mean, I'm saying this within this room, and you have to be careful. But I won't be surprised if Rule 10D is one more item out of the 13th, 14th item is added as country by country reporting, the whole template. Whether OECD accepts or not, India may accept very soon. Other point which is happening in India, that most of the transactions we are clubbing, and we are in a way applying I'm sure methods were discussed right earlier in sessions, but many of us practically have landed up applying the last method or profit-based method on DNMM, combining all the transactions. Which is its import, export, royalties, management charge, and so on and so forth, which may change going further, I think, and we may come to, as TNMM requires, as the name suggests, a transaction net margin method. It's not overall US which have a comparative profit margin method. It is right, so profit arising from transaction, and that will come. As I said, TPOs are also learning very quickly. And just on TNMM and compared to profit margin, it might have been discussed, so if I am repeating, but this was a compromise came when OECD guidelines were finalized in 1995, where Germany and Japan were pressing to have TNMM as the method or profit margins arising from the transactions. Whereas US, as we know, they always think they are a part of the different world or different planet. So they were pressing to have a compared to profit margin method. So it was like a compromise, and OECD works on compromise or consensus. That's how this term of TNMM was kind of invented. But then practically we moved to preparing what US wanted, compared to profit margin method. But soon it will change, I think, on transaction-based method. Just back to our topic on dispute resolution mechanism, and we know this, so we won't dwell much time on that, except that as far as transfer pricing disputes are concerned, or any other dispute, but especially transfer pricing, it takes a lot of time to solve. So we know normally assessments are completed almost after 4 years. So now March 14 just passed by, we have year-ending March 10 assessments got completed. So 4 years have already gone by. Now if I go to DRP, CIT appeal 1, if I go to DRP 1 year, CIT appeal I don't know, maybe 2-3 years. Then I go to tribunal another 2-3 years. and when the bench will function, not function. So many. So in a way, on an average, I am looking at 10 years from the end of my tax year to get something fair or reasonable return. So it's a very, if you see as a taxpayer or as a client, it's a very, the time required is very significant. I mean, for 10 years I am not doing anything. I don't know where I am, and obviously other assessments keep adding subsequent years. So I may have 1 year in High Court, 1 year in Tribunal, DRP, field officer. So and files are not closed. Good for all of us as professionals, but we don't want to work that way. I mean, we obviously want to work to give value to clients and value to society also. But this is one area, especially in India, this is creating a lot of difficulty for all of us. And there is uncertainty. And tribunal, with all respect, especially on transfer pricing disputes, as we know, it's facts now, and we have discussed comparable now. Whether one comparable is correct or not, one can discuss, as they say, till everybody goes home or sleeps. I mean, there is no end. And tribunal many times discusses orders of 100 pages, but if you see at the end, it is come back to TPO. After, I will discuss after say 8 to 10 years. Now practically we know in India, if it is set aside matter or demanded back, which TPO or AO will revert his predecessor order? Nobody. He may enhance, but nobody will reverse. So after I again start a 10-year cycle. So that's the problem we are having, and that's why we think that alternative dispute resolution mechanism like MAP or AP or Safe Harbor is one, at least for transfer pricing, we must explore, or at least suggest to clients, or we are clients, we must explore. The other point we are facing in assessment is that, and this is hard way, it's not like we are also perfect. When I started 10, 12, 14 years now, of course, 2001 it came. But we learned hard way, and all of us learned by experience. But many times we start preparing after when the assessment starts, and when TPO starts asking. And as I said, they have moved the value chain very significantly. It was not like earlier that you kind of, I won't say he can take advantage of his ignorance, but that is not there now. I don't think he is well prepared. When you go many times, many of the TPOs are well studied. They are ready, and I can't go and say I will note down and come back tomorrow or next week. I mean, they get very annoyed, and rightly so. And many TPOs shared their, I will say, sometimes frustration, including DITs, the commissioners of transfer pricing, that many times, and they were generally, they were not specific to any, I will say, individual or any firm or any, but generally as we as professionals, they were saying many times you people come, and then when I ask, where is he? He says, I will come back. I will ask and come back. What are the transactions? I will come back. He says, then why you are coming here? You should be ready, and that's what for us, I think it's a good learning or good guidance from them, that we must study the file and go well prepared. And as one DIT says, Samir, the representative comes as if it's a post office, that you note down, inform clients. He says, can't we work that way? You have to be ready, study the file, in fact help us to understand, then I can give you a good judgment. And I think, in fact it was Mrs. Malti Sridharan who came at one of the, I think, SOCHM conference in February, and she was equally mentioning for their officers also, that they are also not going correct way. But she was saying some suggestions for all of us also, taxpayers and consultants, that you people also help us to, and one of the examples she was giving, that comparables were changed, like from last year to next year. Now when comparables were changed, there has to be some reason. You can't have comparables change from year to year. And then he says, when he asked why the comparables, he said, sir, my consultants were changed. I mean, that's the, and this is not, it's a real what she said. And she also mentioned that this is the real reason he heard. He says, we must work, come out of all this and work. If it's mistake, tell us it's a mistake. We can change it to come with correct comparables. Dispute resolution panel we were discussing earlier, and I spent some time in the first slide itself. I still feel this is a very good mechanism, and to kind of close the dispute, resolve the dispute, and somehow it did not started well, it could not be implemented well, and if you ask DRP members privately or informally, they also share the same anguish or pain. But they say we are part of the system and we have to work with the system. And we are not like Aam Aadmi, we can't change the system. We have to work with the system and see how we can change the system. So this is not to against or for any party. But DRP, I still feel that was a good provision, and that was that you can't go to appeal. Revenue can't go to appeal. Taxpayer can go, but revenue can't go to appeal. I still feel it was a good provision, and now they have allowed revenue to go appeal also. So now practically there is no difference between DRP and CITF. You know, except that you are facing 3 commissioners, which sometimes can be not easy. And whereas in CITP you are facing 1 commissioner. That's the only difference. Otherwise they can go in appeal, and you are in a way deferring by about 9 months. I mean 9 months, whereas CITP has no timeline. But that's the only difference, because demand is going to come. It's not that demand you are just deferring, and that is another problem CITP and DRP has. And because department may be in tribunal, they may be in High Court. So this is not closing anywhere. And DRP, one of the point also, because it's a draft order, and technically that is a draft order, there is no final order. So when we go to DRP, we have to be ready that panel may start with the beginning. So you don't expect panel to start with what is the amount of adjustment or what was the nature of adjustment. Many times member do ask from why this transaction, how you benchmark. So you have to be ready with that time with all transactions. Don't just go prepared with. Obviously, what is amount was adjusted, obviously we have to prepare, but have a good background on what is required, and Milind will talk on some practical tips. Every panel is different, like every member of tribunal is different, and you have to, I won't say maneuver, but we have to prepare accordingly. How panel members wants, so there were 3 panels last time, and every panel you have to, you may prepare paper book, but how you present can be different. One panel may require start with various form 3CB, and other panel just requires give me a nature of adjustment. So you have to get well prepared, and maybe Milind is more expert, so I will leave it to him to guide us later on. So with that, maybe I will end my thoughts, but as I said, let Milind and Mehul takes back, and if Mehul and Milind will allow, I will chip in between whenever I think it may be necessary. But this is from tribunal, and then some of the teams for MAP and APA, and of course practically Mehul you can take us later on after Milind completes. Milind, you can take over from me.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. I will take you briefly through some of the other parts of the presentation regarding stay petitions and the income tax appellate tribunal, and some practical tips, so-called practical tips. At the outset, I know that I think most of the people in this room, I think we are from the profession or from the client side. Many of us are seasoned. Many of us have gone through this, been here, been through that road. So probably a few of these practical tips may be helpful to all of us while dealing with a typical litigation scenario. Now, as far as the tribunal is concerned, I don't want to bore you with the provisions regarding 253, 254, 255. But the importance of the tribunal cannot be lost, because the tribunal is the final fact-finding authority. The High Court will not entertain any appeal, because as we all know, High Court will entertain appeal only if it involves a substantial question of law. So the question should be of law. If there is any dispute on the facts, the High Court certainly will not entertain any appeal. So really, if any facts, if any adjudication has to be based on any facts, then the tribunal is the only authority up to which you should be able to put forward all your arguments. So therefore, really, some of the things which we find, which really need to be emphasized before the tribunal, and which need to be kept in mind, is if you look at the tribunal rules, particularly Rule 8, Rule 8 specifically states that every memorandum of appeal should put forward grounds which are concise, which are not narrative, and which are not argumentative. Now, in my own experience, I have come across situations where this thing happened just a month back. A very large company, a housing finance company, this was probably the 4th or 5th hearing which was taking place, and the learned senior counsel, stood up and started argument, and then the bench just pointed out that, learned senior counsel, before you go ahead, can you just go through the grounds of appeal? And then they said, I'm sorry, we cannot hear this appeal because your entire grounds, you are raising arguments. Your grounds need to be concise, and then once the grounds are concise and you raise a specific point that you want to debate or dispute, the arguments that you raise towards those grounds need not be set out in the grounds of appeal. That you can put forward either in the form of a written submission or in the form of at the time of the hearing. This is something which we need to keep in mind, because otherwise we just waste our time again in redrafting the grounds. Another point which I think, as far as the tribunal, that we need to really keep in mind is sometimes there are unsubstantiated facts. What could happen is that some facts that we want to state are not borne out by some submissions which are made. Now the tribunal has got full powers, because after all it has to give a reasonable ruling based on the facts. So then there is a proviso whereby if some facts are not substantiated, you can always, state these new facts in the form of an affidavit, and the tribunal will accept it. That is one more thing which you need to, it's not that just because you have not submitted a particular fact before the lower authority of the tribunal, you cannot do that before the tribunal. There is a specific provision for that which you need to bear in mind. I don't know how many of you all must have heard of this phrase, a statement at bar. Sometimes the tribunal also, even if there is no affidavit, the tribunal has got full powers where if certain statements are made by the council or the authority before the tribunal, they will accept it without even asking the DR or the department to cross-verify that. And many times you must have read some orders that the learned authorized representative made a statement at bar that the SSC had not made this claim in so and so year. And that of course goes more on the personality of the person who's arguing. If the tribunal, if the bench members have got full faith in that person, that this gentleman is not going to mislead us, they will accept this as a statement at bar. And most important are production of additional evidence and paper books. Now, paper books are dealt with in Rule 18, and the specific provisions is number one, we need to file our paper books at least a week in advance before the department representative and a day before as far as the bench's copy is concerned. We can file a separate paper book as far as a factual compilation is concerned, but as far as the legal compilation is concerned, it is not necessary to prepare and file it beforehand. We can always hand it at the time of the hearing. And obviously, why not? We don't want to disclose all our cards to the department representative what the cases that we are going to rely on, because it will help him. He will say, okay, fine, SSC rely on this decision. Let me go through ITIT online. Let me see which are the decisions which are considered this distinction, and stand up and say that this is the case. In case if there's any additional evidence which is required to be filed, Rule 18.4 of the tribunal rules also clearly states that such additional evidence shall be in the form of a separate paper book. It shall be not included along with the main paper book that we file. And along with that, there should be an application to the tribunal to consider the same and why this could not be filed earlier before the forums below. Now, one practical perspective also is that, really speaking, when we file our paper books, we normally give a certificate below that certified that pages so and so are filed before this, or this was filed before this. So even if in the case of filing any additional evidence, if we do not give a separate